it confuses me sometimes, my name. In fact, I went to North Wales a while ago, and I was told that after 59 years, I've been pronouncing it wrong all that time. It's Rhys. But anyway, never mind that. I'm very pleased to be here today. It's been great coming down here. I've run away, funnily enough. I don't know if any of you have been reading the newspapers today, but I was foolish enough to speak out about the plans to put a large solar farm, and I love the way they use the word farm to describe an industrial piece of industrial plant, but they've decided to stick it down in the middle of the countryside in Suffolk. Very, very beautiful countryside, and they've worked out that they can sort of link it up to the national grid. So they want to put 85 acres of solar panels just in an ordinary agricultural field. And it's a sort of indication of a little bit of some of the things that we're up against that all of us who live in the area have said we really don't want this. It's a decision which seems to be opportunistic in as much as it's just been decided because the farmer has a field there, he has connections, obviously to a bit of the national grid, in fact, and he's decided that he's going to go ahead and put that there, and it sort of opens up. But of course, I've been accused of being a NIMBY again, and not in my backyard. Not my favourite phrase, because we don't have yards in Britain, we have gardens. Yards, NIMBY is an American phrase, and it always confuses me slightly that we use it with such gay abandon over here. But we have gardens, and I happen to believe, intrinsically, that if we don't look after our garden, who do we expect to look after it for us? That I've always claimed, rather sort of emphatically, that I'm proud to be a NIMBY. I don't think of myself as somebody who goes around sort of looking after the area that I live in, or keeping an eye on the area I live in. I'm actually right at the very, very bottom of the NIMBY heap, because I signed up to a thing called the Litter Pledge Union, and I had to sign up to pick up 3 pieces of litter once a week without fail. Now, in a funny way, that is a total NIMBY action. And I salute the people in Scotland who put this thing together and asked people to pledge. And I just thought, what a very simple thing. And in a way, that business of going out and saying, if you're the sort of person, if we were all the sort of people who walked past bits of litter, who walked past rubbish in our environment and said, it's nothing to do with me, somebody else, either some expert or some council official or some national government official should deal with this. They know what they're doing, and I don't want to have any responsibility for that at all. I think it would be a sadder thing and a worse thing for the country that we live in. And so I think I'm standing up for NIMBYs, but of course I'm not a NIMBY today. I've come down, I've got on the train, as a result of being involved in Civic Voice, and now I'm an interfering busybody. Because I'm president of Civic Voice. And if you don't know what Civic Voice is, I'll try and explain it in as short a way as I can. Civic Voice was originally the Civic Trust, which was set up by Duncan Sandys in the 1950s to sort of organise partly the rebuilding of Britain, partly the idea that by organising civic societies or helping to organise civic societies across Britain, they would encourage people to take an interest in their towns in the post-war environment. It was a very big success, and they came to me and said, would you be honorary president? And I said, well, I'm an honorary president, that sounds absolutely terrific. Do I have to do anything? So you have to do absolutely nothing at all, Griff. All you'll do is your name will go on the letterhead, and you know, occasionally we'll ask you to come to a grand general meeting in London. I said, that's absolutely fine, that suits me, that's the sort of job I like. And it's about time I was an unelected president of something. So I said, that's fine, and then they promptly went bust. They for some reason, Civic Trust had extended itself into various schemes, and they had slightly, I think, in many respects, lost touch with what many of their members wanted them to do. And they were involved slightly in a little bit. I remember we had an architectural awards ceremony, and we gave out awards, and it went on till 3 in the morning handing out. And I do remember that the representative of the judging panel got up, and he stood up in the middle of this awards ceremony. He explained something about what his role was, and he said, well, the judging came out, and he said, I just want to do an overview of British architecture over the last 70 years. And he did talk for a long time, quite interestingly, about British architecture. And then he came to the Heritage Conservation Lobby. Yes, well, I suppose you could say they've done a little to help tourism. Anyway, moving on. And his view was that heritage and an interest in cities and city landscape and trying to preserve things at one level was of only a vague and slight commercial value. But the main problem was that we weren't quite having enough room for more and more new architecture. Now, at the time, I remember thinking not so much that I disagreed with him, because I wanted to emphasise very much that one of the things that I really admire about this document is the way that it covers so much of the needs of Canterbury and looks at it from all sorts of angles, and not just from the idea of heritage. But I did feel at the time that there was a little bit that he was saying that was a little bit out of kilter with the opinions of many of the members of the civic societies all across Britain. And in fact, there are a lot. What we did was to say what had been an honorary position then became quite a demanding position, because a group of people got together and said, well, we can't allow this to happen. In particular, people from the National Trust. And the National Trust said, no, we have a CPR campaign for the preservation of rural England, and that does a lot of work. And we may know that that's a very active and vocal group. We have the National Trust, which looks after a great deal of our heritage. But we need societies that concern themselves with our city centres and what our towns, villages, what our immediate built environment is like and how it works and what it's going to represent for the future. And they helped to put together a new structure for the Civic Trust, which became the Civic Voice, and they asked me to stay as their honorary president, which I was very pleased to do, and that's the reason, in a rather long-winded way, why I am here today. In a way, what Civic Voice represents is quite a powerful movement, if it's put together. There are over 300 amenity societies across Britain, across England, I should say, that are members. I say that because I did very sportingly go all the way to Haverfordwest to speak to them, and as I arrived, I said, well, I'm very pleased to come and speak to you here in Wales. You being a member of Civic Voice and everything. Said, oh, no, it's only English Civic Voice. No, we have a separate Welsh society, Griff. You're not the honorary president of that at all. So. But nonetheless, I learned something about Haverfordwest, which I was really pleased to do. And it's a marvellous town and in need of help. And so it was great to be able to talk there. But the point is that Civic Voice altogether has about 75,000 members. And that's quite a good and useful voice. Because one of the things that I become conscious of as president, going around visiting a lot of civic society, is that there is a need for a national voice and a national concern about some of the issues which we are facing in our cities, in our villages and our towns at the moment. And we are here as a national body to try and represent a big federation, a large number of different groups who all effectively want to speak to the government and say, we have concerns. Now, I often get asked, I remember I was talking to the Marylebone Association on a slightly different matter. They had refused to join Civic Voice. And very fiercely, one of their organisers looked me in the eye and he said, and what do you think? What is the policy of Civic Voice on this latest permitted development? And I said, well, we don't have a policy as such, and certainly I don't. I'm just the honorary president. We have a policy of believing that local matters require local involvement. I've been around and spoken to a large number of societies. I did a sort of tour of East Anglia and another tour of Yorkshire, and I spoke to different societies about different things. And what I began to realise is that not only are amenity systems, civic societies, quite different in different places. They have marvellously in Highgate, which is neither in Yorkshire nor East Anglia, but they run almshouses. The civic society there looks after sheltered housing for old people as one of its jobs. In Cambridge past and future, they've called themselves, because they were very, very concerned about the idea that people might think that they were only interested in heritage. They actually own land. And they have bought, in the 30s, there were rich professors and dons who donated money so that they could buy land on the outskirts of Cambridge to protect Cambridge from becoming like Oxford, which had been felt to be slightly over-industrially developed. But what a marvellous thing. And I had no idea, and I realised that they had an almost completely different set of responsibilities to many of the other civic societies that we were going to meet. But what I also discovered was that everywhere I went, I was confronted, and still am, with slightly different problems, slightly unique problems. And one of the reasons for that is that if we look at the principle of any concern about any part of the world we live in, it's actually a local concern. There are local concerns. I mean, it's actually not just city-wide, but street-wide. I mean, it's what's happening with our neighbour. I went to speak to the Hampstead and Highgate Association, who told me that they were, having been founded in 1830, the oldest civic society in the country. And I said, oh, well, that's funny, because I'm a member of the Fitzroy Square, the Frontages, and we were founded in 1807. But our only purpose is to look after our square and the front of the square and to ensure that people paint their railings and do that. And so, in a funny sort of way, we do find that there are local concerns which actually are so local that sometimes when I ask for questions, I try to address some of the major values of civic amenity groups, cities, and towns, and I have some huge ideas. Don't forget that. I know exactly how high streets all over the country should be put to better use. I've got lots of big theories, and everybody who had lunch with me just now has heard them all. And I have some huge theories, but I'm also aware that it's the smaller concerns around the country that are the unique concerns that are also the concern of civic societies. And I'm also aware that each place that you go to has specific problems. What's great about reading this, about this vision, about going through it, is that it teaches you so much about Canterbury and about what it faces and where its problems are, and that sometimes, if I go to the north of England and I'm in Bradford or Sheffield, I'm talking to people whose concern is that the pressure is off those towns, that they face a problem of lack of need, of underdevelopment, of nobody coming to those towns. I spent a magnificent weekend in Blackpool with the Blackpool Civic Society, and they have some of the most magnificent buildings in Britain, real monuments to our history, like the Winter Gardens. They're holding together the fabric of a city which was built as a destination thanks to the Factory Acts of the 19th century, which freed up working people to have holidays, and all working people have now gone to Benidorm. They don't necessarily want to go to Blackpool anymore. But as a result, Blackpool was built as this extraordinary destination. And they have to face the problem of what do they do with this infrastructure, these extravagant and rather wonderful buildings, which they need to use and get people back into, and they need to think about their town, and there, as a civic society, cherishing, looking after. They have tours of these places, they show people round, they try to get people to use them and involve them. They have an awards ceremony every year where they give awards to people who've done bits to help the Blackpool heritage. The bigger question of how this gets solved, how this ultimately gets solved. Gordon Brown, as you may know, decided at one point he was going to turn it into Las Vegas and licensed gambling in Blackpool. I believe now they've discovered shale gas underneath it, so there may be a sort of fracking bonanza happening there, and it may fill up with oil men in a little while. But it's true that all cities, all places, go through changes and are facing change, alteration all the time. There's no such thing as an entirely static city, which, as it were, needs to be kept in aspect. And what I've learned as I've gone around is that all towns, villages and cities are having to change in some way and embrace change, look at that change and find out solutions which they hope will adopt to the pressures that are coming on them. And those pressures, effectively, are different for different places. What's fascinating about this document to me is that it illustrates, as you read it, pressures which are unique to Canterbury, which Canterbury has and which basically are not solved by what I would call national policy. So our job, my job and the job of Civic Voice in representing the Canterbury Society, is effectively to say to Nick Bowles, as we did yesterday, we had a meeting, there were members of the Canterbury Society there in an all parliamentary group, an APPG. And you may find as we go on, there are all sorts of acronyms whistling around. I have sat in meetings where I haven't understood a word that's been said, because so much of it is about planning regulations, and people use sort of acronyms and shorthand and things like that, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is fascinating, but I haven't the faintest idea what anybody's talking about. But when we went to see Nick Bowles, I think our desire was to say this. They have recently, this government have said they have a faith in the idea of localism. They believe in the idea of local people looking at the planning of their and the future of their cities and getting together to make neighbourhood plans. And they're sort of ordering them up. They've ordered up local plans and said to councils, if you don't come up with a local plan, we'll reduce the amount of money that's going to be given to you. They've also said, you've got to make a local plan, because if you don't make a local plan, we will decide for you, ourselves, what is going to be foisted on your city. So there's a pressure to say, yes, we have to decide what it is that we want to do. And this, in a way, is an answer to that. It is to say, we are a local group. We've looked closely at our environment. We've looked very closely at all the things that are going on in this town, not just heritage, but schools, transport, open space, safety, the nighttime economy, the student population. We've looked at all of this, and we have made recommendations. What I want to emphasise is that what Civic Voice has to do is go not with the platform of saying we are absolutely in favour of this or against this of national policy, but to say, listen, just pay attention. We have 75,000 members. You are inviting them to comment. We want you to pay attention and to encourage councils, local authorities, to also pay attention. Because when the work is as good as it is in this document, when it's as thorough, and when these design plans are coming through, and if you go, and I recommend, I hope that we at Civic Voice can echo this, if you go on the Prince's Regeneration Trust, they have case studies of local groups who have got together and made neighbourhood plans, and some of the effects and thoughts and the design by planning that's going through there, and they're very, very worthwhile studying. What they're all saying is, look, we are local people, we see the problems, we understand that we need affordable housing, we understand your concerns about ecology, and this is what we think would be best for this area, because we know about it and we've done our homework and we have a belief in this area. One size does not fit all. Recently, the government has taken an axe to the Gordian knot and tried to unravel the planning regulations and sort of given the impression that a sort of free-for-all. They will happen. They also intrinsically believe that development for itself is worthwhile encouraging, because we don't have a manufacturing industry, we have a shaky financial services industry which has proved to be a little bit worrisome across the world and may not be the foundation of our economy for time to come, but they believe in the Treasury intrinsically that if they can just get those white vans driving around and building as much as possible, then in a way that will overcome a lot of our financial problems in the near future. We beg to differ. We say, it's not that we're opposed to building. It's not that we're opposed to affordable housing. It's not that we're opposed to ecological or sustainable concerns. But we want them to be done well. And we want them to be done in a way which reflects the actual and unique needs of the city that we live in. Because it is not the same here as Blackpool. And it is not the same as Bradford, and it's not the same as Hadley in Essex. All these places which I have visited have proved to me that they each of them have unique problems, and they each need a voice, and you need to articulate that voice and make sure that everybody can hear you. And in order to do that, the one thing I'm going to sit down in a moment, I promise, but the one thing that I recommend to everybody to do is to welcome the debate that's coming here, the opportunity to talk about it. You may not agree with everything in here, but the more people who join that NIMBY community, who join the community of people who pick up litter in their own street, who worry about the frontage on their neighbours, who concern themselves with the fact that the church at the corner is about to be demolished and replaced with a shed. The more people who do that, and the more people who talk about it and have a position on it, the more the local voice will be heard. And that is really what civic voice, about what civic societies and what the Canterbury Society is really about. So I'm looking round, I'm guessing that we haven't got many students here. I'm not saying that we're all, over 40. I'm just guessing a little bit that one of the things that's important is to make sure, if we want to be a voice, that we represent as many people as possible. Because if you look through the government's recent plans, they make it perfectly clear that when they talk about the community, they mean the business community. What I also know in terms of the business community is certainly where we live, most of the business community don't live anywhere near where we live. They actually live in suburbs of London, and they run large corporate organisations which they demand to be satisfied with what they want, but the local community don't stand a chance. I think what we need to embrace as a civic society is small businesses. We need to embrace as many residents as possible. I think we need to embrace people who live here, and we need to recruit. And if I had a message to give to the Canterbury Society and to all of you, is go forth and multiply. Go out, find friends, get them to join, and find ways of making the Canterbury Society into something which gets bigger every year and becomes something which focuses on the whole city for the enjoyment of the city. And that sense of being out there and having as much fun as they do in Blackpool by, if you know somebody who owns the key to a building that most people don't get into, but walk by and say, I wonder what's in that, persuade them to open it one day and take people in there and show them around. Reward the people who do really good things by giving them an award from the Canterbury Society. And all these matters, get school children to spend time and interest themselves in some of the changes that could come and draw up plans. Open yourselves. Don't be a closed community, be as open as you can, because only that way, by encouraging debate, by discussing what is in here, can a real consensus be achieved and real progress be made. So I've harangued you enough. Thank you for listening to me. And other people here know much more details about Canterbury than I do. Thank you very much.